All right, I think that we are live. So let's just double check. All right, so thank you guys for coming to class today. We are going to be doing like an underwater design of some kind. We'll just kind of work on it together and see what we come up with. So I think that this is going to be a really fun sketch for us to do, and we are actually going to animate it as well, and we're going to talk about how we can change some of the parameters. So we're going to use a fish, and we're going to change its color, and we're going to change its size too. So we'll be talking about how to use variables, how to use conditional statements. So if you weren't in class last week, or if even if you were in class last week, this is going to be a good introduction or a good review. So it's always good to keep practicing and learning new skills and practicing those skills once you get them. So please do us a favor and like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're almost at 50 subscribers, so one of you might be our 50th subscriber, which would be awesome. And just go ahead and get a new sketch open and ready to go. Make sure that you have it in advanced mode. So yours should look like mine with function setup and function draw over here, and then with our canvas right here. And I always change my canvas so that it's a little bit smaller. It's just easier for me to show things to you guys. So if you want to make yours look like mine, you could make it 550 wide and 350 tall. Otherwise, you can just keep it bigger, and that's totally fine. Your sketch does not have to look exactly like mine today, but there will be a couple of things that I'll ask you to do with me just to practice some of our variables and some of our conditional statements. So when you guys are ready to go, let us know in the chat, and then I will get started. Make sure that you have an advanced sketch. If you open a beginner one, it won't have any words right here, but if you just type in the words, that won't work either. You have to open a whole new sketch and make sure it's in advanced, because you can see our canvas here is much bigger than the one that we use in beginner mode, so make sure that you're doing that. All right. Seems like everyone is pretty much ready to go. Let me know if you guys can hear me okay, if you can see what I'm doing all right. And let me know if my screen is zoomed in enough. I think that this is usually as big as it is. All right. So let's just get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a background, and I'm going to just do a really light blue color for the sky. So I'm going to go inside of function draw. It's really important that everything that we're doing, unless I say otherwise, goes inside of these two curly brackets. So this is the opening curly bracket, down here is the closing curly bracket, and everything that we want to put inside of function draw has to be inside of those two lines. Otherwise, the computer will not read it. Like I said, this only applies for most of the code we're doing today. There will be a few lines that we'll put outside. If anyone remembers what goes outside of function draw, let us know in the comments. If you remember, there's a certain name for something that goes outside that we're going to be using today. All right, so I'm going to use a really light blue for the background, so make sure you have a background color in. And then I'm going to do no stroke, capital S on the stroke. And we are going to make a rectangle, but first I'm going to do a fill for it. And this is going to be like our ocean. So most of this is going to be like an underwater sketch. So choose a color that you think would be good for underwater. All right, so I put in a fill command and now I'm going to make a rectangle, and I want this to be a pretty big rectangle, so I'm going to put most of my canvas as the underwater portion. So I'm going to start it right here at 0, 100. My canvas is 550 units wide, so I'm going to just make this 600 wide, and then I'm just going to make it 400 tall because I know for sure that that'll be big enough. All right. So I like the way this looks so far. I'm going to make this a little bit wider. Yeah, that should be good. All right, so we have our sky up top and then we have our ocean down below, and I'm going to put a little rectangle of sand too. So I'm going to put in another fill command. I'm going to find like a nice sandy brown color. And just a little tip, you guys, you can always change the colors just a little bit by using the bars up top here. So that's the color I'm going to go with. We'll see if it sticks around. I tend to change the colors around a lot. And I just want like a sliver of sand. I don't want like a big chunk. Maybe I'll just do up at 300. And I'll just do, oops, X first. So 0, 300. And let's just make that 600 wide, and we'll just make it like 100 tall. All right. So at this point, what I've done so far is I've made sure that everything is inside of function draw, inside of those curly brackets. I wrote in a background that's a light blue color for the sky. I put in a rectangle that is dark blue for the ocean. And then I put a fill and a rectangle in that's like a light sandy color down below. So let me know when you guys have all of this set up and ready to go. And I'm going to just add some comments to my code. These are really useful when you have to go back and modify something. We won't really be doing that today too much, but it is really useful to have. So I'm just going to comment sky, ocean, sand, and to comment something just means to put 2 slashes in front of it, and that just makes it so that the computer doesn't read whatever you wrote. So you could write like little tips for yourself, like if you're going back and trying to do another project that's similar to this, you could write step by step what I'm telling you, and that would really help you with making the next one, because if you realize like, oh, this isn't moving and I don't know why, you can go in, look at your comments and say like, okay, this is the magic line that makes everything move, and then you'll know exactly where to start. All right. So I have my sky, my ocean, and my sand. And the next thing that I'm going to do is design a little fish. And I'm just going to start with like a really simple fish. I'm just going to do like a longer ellipse, and then I'm going to do a triangle at the end. So I'm just going to start it somewhere, not really like random on the canvas, but just somewhere, oops. Just somewhere. So I'm going to do it at 150, 200, and I want it to be, let's say 30 wide and 20 tall. I'm going to make it a little bit wider than that, 40 wide. Okay, I like the way, maybe 50. Let's see. Yeah, 50 is good because we're going to have this change a little bit, and I think it'll look better if it's a longer fish like that. And I'm going to just put in a fill color for it for right now. I'm just going to color it in white. And you can change yours to be any color you want. I'm going to show you a way to modify it so that we can change the color of the fish every time that it swims by. So it doesn't really matter what color it is unless you don't want yours to be a color changing fish. Okay. So I have my ellipse in there, and I just made it somewhere on the canvas, and I made it 50 units wide and 20 units tall. I would like it if yours was about the same size, I just think it'll be really easy when we are talking later on about how to change the color and how to change the size. All right, so now I'm going to do a triangle for the back fin. And one really useful thing that you can do, I don't know if I've showed you guys this trick before, but if you're doing a triangle, it's really useful to sketch it out with your mouse where you want all three corners to go. And then you can use this little key down here, and it gives you the X, Y value of wherever your mouse is. So that's a really useful tool, especially when you're doing triangles, because they can be a little bit picky and a little bit trickier to do. So it's always helpful to use a little tip like that. All right, so that's all I'm doing now. I'm making the triangle on the end of my fish. And if you guys feel like you want me to slow down, or if you need help with something, you can let us know in the comments. Also, you can pause this video, you can rewind it, you can catch back up to us live, so don't feel like you have to stay on pace with everything I'm doing. If you want to take a little bit more time with something, feel free to pause it. It just means that if you ask a question in the chat, we might get to it a little bit later, but it shouldn't really be a problem. You should still get the help you need quickly. All right, so let's just put a little eye on it too. Why not? And by no means do you have to do the little eyeball. I'm just doing it so everyone has time to catch up if they want. Okay, I think that looks good. All right, so what I'm going to do now is make it so that my fish moves. That is the first step. So I want my fish to basically swim to the right. So it's swimming across the x-axis, but its y location isn't moving at all. So to do that, we want to make a variable. And remember, a variable is something that can change, like the length of your hair, the day of the week, the time, your height, your shoe size, stuff like that, things that can change. And so we want to make our fish's x location something that can change. So to do that, we need to make a variable. To make a variable, we're going to go above function draw, and I like to make a few spaces up here, and we're going to write var, so V-A-R. If you have it spelled right and you put the space, it should turn purple. Then you're going to give it a name. So I'm going to name it fish X because it's related to my fish and it's moving the x-axis. If I wanted it to change the y, I could name it fish Y. I could also just name it X and Y. You could totally do it that way and that would be easy enough. But it's always easiest if you give it a name that's really related to what you're talking about. So var fish X equals, and I'm just going to say 0. All right. So fish X now is something that we can change, we can add it to stuff, we can subtract it, multiply it, all that kind of stuff. What we want to do in this specific case is go down to where we made our fish, and we want to add it to the X value of each one of our shapes that we used. So in this case, I started with an ellipse, so the X value is the first number of the ellipse. So I'm going to write 150 plus fish X. And nothing is going to change because I made fish X 0. If I had made fish X 100, then you could see a change. It moves 100 spots. That's why I just keep it at 0, because then you don't have to do any like math or anything like that. All right, so 150 plus fish X. Then for a triangle has 3 X coordinates, right? Because we're doing X, Y, X, Y, X, Y. So what you have to do is add fish X to each one of those X values. So if you just add it to 1, later on when we have it move, the 1 point will move and the other 2 will stay where they are. So it'll like drag the tail of the fish, which is not what we want. All right, so we've got that one. We've got this one. And one more. And another easy way that you can do this is that you can copy the plus fish X part right here and then just paste it in everywhere that you need it. All right, so the last shape that's attached to my fish is this ellipse that I made the eye with. So you just want to make sure whatever shape or size you made your fish, you want to make sure that all of the X coordinates of all of the shapes are attached to fish X. That means that you're adding fish X to them. So let us know how you're doing in the comments. If you need me to slow down or speed up. So let's just leave it like this. So right now I have my variable for fish X. I have my background, which is my sky. I have the ocean, which I made with a rectangle. I have the sand, which I also made with a rectangle. I have the fish that I made with 2 ellipses and a triangle. And I'm gonna make it move. So the magic line that we have to put in to make this fish move is fish X equals fish X plus 1. The reason that that works is because everything that's happening in function draw is getting read 60 times every second. So 60 times every second, the fish is moving 1 space from where it was before. If, for example, we had just done like 150 equals 150 plus 1, that wouldn't have worked, right? It would have just moved 1 unit because 150 would always just equal 151 if you add 1 to it. Does that make sense? So that would never work. That's why it's really important that we use variables because they allow us to change the numbers. All right. And one thing you really want to make sure you're doing, you're not replacing all your X values with fish X, you're just adding them. So I just went in and I said, okay, 150 was my normal X value, I'm gonna add fish X to it. All right, so I'm gonna clear the canvas and let this run again so we can talk about what's happening next. So our fish is swimming to the end of the canvas and then it's just disappearing. So that's the next thing that we're going to fix, and we're going to fix it with a conditional statement. And we will get to that in just a second. Seems like a few people are just catching up. If you are all caught up and ready to go, make sure that you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's a really big help for us if you guys do that. That would be awesome. So go ahead and make sure that you are all caught up. All right, make sure that you are all caught up. And if you aren't, just feel free to rewind the video and you can catch back up that way. But at this point, you should have your fish and it should be swimming to the end of the canvas. And then the next thing that we're going to do is make a conditional statement. So a conditional statement says, if something happens, then something else will happen. So for example, if it's raining outside, then I will wear my rain boots. Or if I'm up past my bedtime, then I will get in trouble. Or something like that. So a conditional statement is something that we want to basically check if something is true, and then we want to tell the computer what to do if it finds that that thing is actually true. So in this case, I'm going to say if you find out that fish X is greater than, let's just say 700, then what I want to happen is I want fish X to equal 0 again. Okay, so let's break that down. So I said if, and then in a set of parentheses, so if, and then you make your set of parentheses, fish X is greater than, and make sure you're using the right inequality sign. It's really easy to mess these up, but just think of it as a mouth that wants to eat the bigger value. So if it's eating the fish X, then it would be greater than. So if fish X is greater than 700, then we want fish X to go back to 0. So we can see that it's kind of like just reappearing in this area, which doesn't really make it look realistic, like it's swimming to the end and then like looping back, or like it's a brand new fish just swimming into the scene. So what we can do to fix that is instead of 0, we can make that a negative number, like negative 200. Because now what it'll do is it'll go back 200 spots from where it normally would start. So now it's swimming, gets to the end, it's in that 700 range, and then hopefully it'll peek out from over on the left side. There we go. So now it looks a little bit more realistic. And so if you're looking at this and you're thinking like, all right, the fish is going super slow, then you could change the value from 1, you could change it to like 5. 5 would be pretty fast, but you could change it like that. We'll probably keep it at like 2. Yeah, I think 2 is a good speed. All right. So the next thing that I'm going to show you guys is how to make the fish change colors. But first I'm going to go through and I'm just going to comment my code. So I'm going to say this line makes the fish move. And then I could even add another one that says the number added controls the speed. So it's really important to leave these kind of notes for yourself so that maybe if you take a week off from coding, or if you just want to make another sketch that's really similar to this, you can go back and you can say, oh, okay, that's where I did it. And you can even say like fish added fish X to all of the X values. Okay. Okay, so this is the line that fixes if it goes off the screen. Ooh, that is not how you spell screen. Then it comes back. Okay. So now I have pretty much all of my comments in there. I've got all my code figured out. So make sure if it says that there's an error code, or sometimes it'll say like, here, let's just see what happens. If I get rid of the curly bracket at the end of my if statement, it says unexpected end of input on line 43 or 45, but I don't even have a line 45. So that's a good tip to me that I'm missing one of my curly brackets. So you can also use these little triangles on the side, close them up, and that'll show you like, all right, everything that's inside of there is happening if fish X is greater than 700. And all right, that's everything that I want to happen. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do, when we're talking about colors, we use the RGB system. So it's red, green, and blue. So like for example, in background, the numbers go from 0 to 255, 255 being the most and 0 being the least. So just 0 on its own is black, and 255 is white. So there'll be lighter colors the bigger they get, and darker colors the smaller they are. And so I'm going to make a variable here for r, and I'm going to make that r equal a random number. And I want to add a few parameters to that. I don't want it just to be any random number. So I'm going to make a set of parentheses, and I'm going to say 200. That means that it'll be a random number up to 200. So I want to do the same for G and the same for B. If you're having an error code pop up at this point, it's probably because you are missing, or you're spelling random wrong, or maybe you missed where you write var, something like that. So now I have these variables set up to be random colors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to where I made my fish, and for the body of my fish, instead of it being white, I'm going to change it to R, G, B. So now it's just a random color that was randomly selected, and every time I reload it, it's going to be a new random color. So this is pretty cool, but it would be kind of boring to just sit here and press clear canvas over and over and over again to see the different colors it chooses. So what I can do is I can add some extra information in to where I say if fish X is greater than 700. So I don't want my fish to just come back, I want it to come back a new color. So what I'm going to say is I want R to equal a new random number up to 200 again. So I'm basically just restating that variable and asking it, okay, if my fish leaves the screen, have it come back a new color. So now it's green, it's making it to the end, and then it's going to come back, and it's a new color now, it's red. So we can see this a little bit easier if we make it a little bit faster. So I'm going to change that to 5. Okay, so it's a light blue color, and then it comes back as a pink color, and then another pinkish color, and then green. So we can see every time it's coming back a new color. Another thing that we could do is if we maybe made a variable for the fish's Y value, we could make it so that every time it comes, it chooses a new random Y value so that it looks like a different fish every time. So let's go in and do that. It's just good practice to work on adding some new variables. So we're going to write var fish Y, and we can just make that equal 0. Right? And we can add that in to the Y values of all of our shapes. This one's a little bit easier because, like, for the triangle, you just add it to the other ones that you haven't gotten to yet. For the ellipses, you just do it to the second one. So then I could say in here, like, okay, I want fish Y to equal fish Y minus 10 or something. So then every time it comes back, it like sinks back down. Or I guess minus would be going up, right? So 10 is a little bit harder to see, but let's try doing like plus 50 would really change it so we can see that it's working. So plus 50, I'll move it down 50 units. There we go. So I'm going to just leave that as plus 10. And then one more thing that we could do using variables that's a pretty easy change is change the size. So I'm going to go over everything that I've done so far just so everyone can double check their work, and then we will come back and chat about this. I'm going to change this back to 2. Okay. So far this is what I've done. Above function draw, I made 5 variables. I made one for my fish's X location, which is going to help with moving it to the right. I made one for my fish's Y location, which will help with moving it up or down. I made a variable for R, which is going to control the red color, the amount of red basically. And I made that a random number that goes up to 200. So it's basically any number up to 200. For G, I did the exact same thing, a variable for G that equals random in parentheses 200. And then the same thing for B, where I said it equals a random number up to 200. Then going down into the scope of function draw, so into the curly brackets that hold together function draw, I made a background that's my sky, so it's this color right here, making sure that I did that very, very first, because if you don't do that first, it'll cover up everything that you've already done. I put in no stroke, which basically just makes it so that there are no outlines on any of my shapes. I could really easily get rid of that. I just don't like the way that the outlines look. And also when you're doing a shape when you're doing a drawing where the shapes are overlapping, so like for example, this triangle and the ellipse overlapping with each other, if the outlines are on there, it'll look a little bit messy because you'll either have the outlines of the triangle going into the fish, or you'll have the outline of the ellipse on top of the triangle, so it never really looks perfect. So I always just get rid of them. So I had background, my no stroke. Then I made my ocean by putting in a fill command for this dark blue rectangle. And I just made a rectangle. I did the same thing for the sand, putting in a fill color for this like light brown color, and then making a rectangle with an X value of 0, so it starts from the left side. And then this is where I did all the code for my fish. So for the fill, I put in R, G, B, so that when my fish appears on the canvas, it's a random color. I don't know what color it's going to be. Then I said, okay, I want an ellipse, and I wanted it at 150, and then I added fish X to it so that I could change that number. It wouldn't always be 150, it could change. I did the same thing for the Y value, adding in fish Y to it so that it can change. It's not always going to be 200, it's something that can change since I added fish Y to it. I did the same thing for the triangle, but a triangle has 6 numbers in it, so I had to do plus fish X, plus fish Y, plus fish X, plus fish Y, over and over and over again until I got to the end. Then I put in a fill for black, and I just put in a little eyeball that I also attached to fish X and fish Y by adding it to the X value and to the Y value. And it's really important that if you're making something move on a canvas, you add all of the moving parts to the variable, because otherwise the eye would just get stuck. So like let's see what this would look like if I took away adding fish X and fish Y. So now if my fish is moving, you'll see it just leaves its eye behind, which is not what we want. So I'm going to go back, and if I just add plus fish X right behind the X value, the first number, and then I go right behind the second number, and I do plus fish Y. So now the eye is moving with the fish. we scroll down a little bit, I said fish x equals fish x plus 2. And that means that I want my x value to change, and I want it to grow by 2 every time that this gets read, which is 60 times every second. So if I wanted my fish to go faster, I would just change what I added to it. So instead of doing 2, I could do 7, and that would make it go really fast. All right, the last thing that I did is made a conditional statement, and it's kind of a big conditional statement. It says, if fish x is greater than 700, then, and the way you say then is with a set of curly brackets, then what I want to happen is I want fish x to equal negative 200. So that means if my fish's x value got all the way over here to 700, I basically want it to restart over here off the screen entirely so that it looks like it loops right through. Then I made my R a new random number so that it would change colors every time it reappeared on the canvas. So I did a random R, a random G, and a random B. You could easily just do one of these and have the B or the G stay the same. We can try that out and see what it looks like. It wouldn't be like as unique of colors, but you know, there would still be some variation in there. But it's best to just have them all. All right, and then I also made it so that the fish's Y value got bigger by 10. So that means that my fish goes down every time it comes back around on the canvas, just to make it look like it's, you know, a different fish every time it kind of moves a little bit. So you could choose to do not all of these things, doesn't really matter. We're going to make another variable, and this time we're going to control the size. So for this one, I'm going to say var space, and I'm going to name it size, and I'm going to set it equal to 20. The reason that I'm setting it equal to 20 is because I want to control the height of my fish. I'm going to make this look like a puffer fish. So I'm going to make it look like it gets scared by something and it puffs up so the size gets bigger. So right here, this is my main ellipse that makes the body of my fish. And what I'm going to do there is I'm going to just take that 20 out and write size instead. And you'll see nothing changes. That's because I haven't told size to change. So all I did was make a variable called size, and I made it equal to 20, which is how tall my fish was. Then I went into the main ellipse that I make my fish at, my fish body basically, and I made it 150 plus fish x, comma, 200 plus fish y, comma, 50 wide, and then size tall. You could also make this height instead of size. You could make it grow. You could make it anything. But like I said, I like to make it something that is related to what it actually does. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make another conditional statement. And for this, I'm going to say if, and then in a set of parentheses, fish x is greater than, let's say 200, then I want size to equal 50. So it doesn't always have to be size equals size plus 1 or size minus 1 or something like that. That one was really blue, so it's kind of hard to see, but it did work. So let's try it again. So it gets to that point. That one did not work. There we go. So once it gets to that point, it puffs up like a puffer fish. And you can choose to make it, instead of 50, you can make it like 40. You could make it so that the tail gets bigger too. That would be a little bit more complicated. You could also make it like way more dramatic. You could make it like 80. Let's try like 70. It does get to a point where it's like too big and it doesn't really look good. Yeah, that's a little too big. I think 40 was my favorite. So now it looks like, oh, it's swimming along, sees something, gets scared, and puffs up. Okay, but now you'll notice that when it comes back, it's still this bigger size, and that's because we haven't told the size to do anything other than equal 40. So what I could do is I could go up to this area right here where I said, all right, well, if fish X is greater than 700, then what I want to happen is, and I could add in a line that says size equals 20. And that'll just make our size go back to normal as soon as it reaches 700. So it's all the way. And when it comes back, it will be nice and thin again. All right. So that's just a few ways that you can use variables to change parts of your drawings. So you can change the X locations, the Y locations, the size, the colors. You could make like a sun in the sky that like dips in and out. You could make a sun that moves across the sky that makes it darker when it leaves. We have a video on our channel called, I think it's called Animated Landscape, and in that one I talk about how you can make it go from daytime to nighttime on your drawing. So you guys could use that one as a resource if that's something you're interested in. You could also, we could also add in a conditional statement that checks if our Y value gets to a certain height, because right now the numbers are getting bigger. Yeah, they're getting bigger, so it's kind of going down. So I could say if fish Y is greater than or equal to, so you can use those signs, greater than or equal to signs. And I could say, I don't really want it to be lower than this, so I could say like 300. Then I want fish Y to equal maybe like 150. So let's try that. And just to test it, I'm going to make it more dramatic. I'm going to make it fish Y plus 30, and that's going to make it move down a little bit faster. All right, so conditional statements are really useful too when you want something to change, but only so much. Like you don't want it to get too big or too small. You can always change the size. You could make it like the size equals negative size or something like that. So now we can see that our fish is swimming along the bottom. So this next time it should go back up to 150. Oh, maybe next time after this. Oh, you know what it is? So our Y location isn't just fish Y. So this is what's going on. So it's actually 200 plus fish Y, so it won't actually happen until it reaches like 550. So you could say if 200 plus fish Y, which is the center of my fish, and this is a good reminder to you guys about how to fix things that you think might be wrong. You really want to go back, look at, okay, what variable am I talking about? What X and Y location am I talking about? Am I looking at the right numbers, and am I doing it in the right spot? So for example, if I like took all of this and put it inside of these curly brackets, it wouldn't work the same way as if it's in its own little area down here. So that is something you always want to check. So now it should work the next time through. What is fish? Oh. I'm going to set fish Y to 0. That's what the problem is. Again, a really great reminder on how to fix little problems, and a great reminder that I run into these little problems too, so don't feel like you need to feel frustrated and disappointed if you mess up on a project, because I'm sure that I've done the same thing. It's really easy to mess up little things like that, but coding is a lot of just trial and error and figuring out how to fix those little problems when you run into them. You can also totally submit your projects now, and I will share them with the group, or you can submit them if you need help with them. If you do need help, we can reach out to you and let you know what's going on with your code. So just keep that in mind. I'm gonna go check right now and see if anybody has submitted any of their projects for today. Doesn't look like anyone has submitted anything yet. If you guys have any like special requests of anything you want me to go over before class is over, that's awesome. I'd be more than happy to do that. This is pretty much all that I wanted to go over with you guys today, talking about how we can change different variables. So in this one, we used variables for X, Y, RGB, and size, and we were able to change all of those for our fish. All right, so looks like a lot of people are signing off, so I'm gonna guess that you guys are done with your projects. Don't feel like you have to submit your project right now. Anytime that you submit it, we'll check it out and we'll get back to you if you need help, or we will share it next time that we have a class. Feel free to rewind this video and check it again if you need help with something else, or you can reach out to us and we'll help you out with it. All right, well, thanks for coming to class today, you guys. Let me know in the comments or in the chat or wherever if you have any special requests for a class topic. So if there's anything that you really want to cover, or if you feel like you want to like kind of go back to basics and try some of the more basic stuff again, that's totally fine. We can do that next time. Just let me know what you guys want to do. All right, see you guys next week.